18th. We sit as a one-person committee until other members arrive, so we can start with item 1.
Chairman.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Jim Clark, Director of Federal Relations for the Mayor's Office, and I'm joined by Stacy Sosa with the CAO's office. I've been asked to make a brief presentation on some non-ARA grant opportunities that the city is pursuing, so I'd like to do that after Stacy has gone ahead and given the overview from the CAO's office.
Thank you.
Good morning. I would just like to highlight a few recent changes to the dashboard since our last meeting of ad hoc. There's been one new grant award and one denial. Total grant funds awarded increased by just over $120,000 due to Aging's recent award for the Community Research Project. Aging is a subrecipient of a larger award made to UCLA to support the development of the Center for Community Research for lower-income older adults, and Aging will use these funds to partially offset the annual salary of their general manager over the next 3 years. That's also item number 2 on today's agenda, and Aging's here to discuss this project further. Additionally, ITA's application for the LA Cares project was not selected for funding during the second round of BTOP. ITA had requested over $12 million in funding, and the U.S. Department of Commerce indicated that ITA's application did advance to the due diligence review, however, did not successfully demonstrate that it would generate a sufficient number of new subscribers and other regular users. And just to put it in context, the NTIA had received over 900 applications requesting over $13 billion in federal funding for the second round of BTOP, with only $3.5 billion available for the second round. So it was extremely competitive.
Let me just ask on that project, because we had a massive news conference at one of our work source centers, and the Secretary of Commerce was there, and is there ability to resubmit? Is that just,
No, there's not. BTOP funding has been completely awarded now through both round 1 and round 2.
Okay.
So it's
But, Mr. Chairman, we did receive $7.5 million, the largest single grant under BTOP 1. And that was the one that the Secretary of Commerce came out to the work.
Is that where the computers?
That's for the computers and broadband in work source centers, public libraries, and rec centers.
Okay, so this was in addition to that $7 million?
Correct.
Okay.
This is
all right.
round 2 funding.
Okay.
Also, we have updated information on job
Let
creation.
me just ask one other question.
Sure.
Did we know when they talked about new subscribers, what was the deficiency in the grant, why they made that determination?
The letter didn't get that specific. It just broadly stated that that was the reason that the application didn't receive funding.
So the premise was that we were going to make, I guess, the City of LA more compatible with technology. So they didn't give us consideration for the number of people that were already available. They based it on us drawing more people into the system, seemed to be what they graded it on?
Correct. That's my understanding.
Okay. All right.
That kind of award. We also have updated information on job creation, retention, and expenditures and reimbursements for the month of August. We've seen a significant increase in job creation and retention. Just over 5,000 jobs were created or retained with Recovery Act funds. This consists of approximately 2,000 jobs in the private sector and 3,000 jobs in the city and public sectors. The primary reason for this increase is the TANF funding that was used for youth summer jobs. Alone, TANF funded 4,259 FTEs in the month of August. So what we're going to see in September is we're going to see it decrease by about 1,300 just because of TANF, and then in October all of those jobs are going to go away completely, and then we'll start to see our numbers level out and probably dip back down into the 600 or 700 level. Cumulative expenditures through August 31st have increased by just over $46 million to $145.57 million, which is about 23% of funds expended. Total reimbursements through August 31st have increased by $2.56 million to $79.86 million. And that's all I have for you today.
Okay. Let me just ask, there were some requested report backs. Are we going to deal with that during this meeting? and I think a couple of them showed that they'd be responding back from different council members on the committee ask about.
Correct. Today, we will be hearing from the mayor's office regarding their communications strategy for the EECBG grant, and then also Jim Clark is going to provide some information on the Sustainable Communities grant.
Okay. And then, Mr. Clark, have we heard you more on, I may mess up the name, clean cities and taxis?
Yes, in fact, I've had a meeting with the taxi people over at DOT, and we're planning to meet with SCAG about pursuing the grant opportunities. The NOFA still hasn't yet come out, but we expect it to be out shortly, and we want to go after those funds. I also, I had a meeting the other day over with DWP, and as part of their smart grid technology grant that they got through ARA, they're planning to install 621 electric charging stations throughout the city, and there's also another group called Ecotality that's won a federal grant to install some 6,000 electric charging stations, mostly that would be in the city of Los Angeles and some of the suburbs. And so we're looking at maybe there's a real opportunity there to try to encourage the taxi drivers to even switch over to electric vehicles if we could, in the next 3 to 5 years, have, thousands of charging stations available throughout the city. So
I think we just this week we approved the extension of the contracts for the franchises, and my understanding is that very shortly the Taxi Commission will address the issue of reconsidering the emission standards. That would be the first step in the sense of the greening aspect. So we just want to see if we can just keep a handle on the prospects of that clean city money.
yes, sir.
Okay.
Be happy to. As I mentioned, I was asked to talk a little bit about some of the non-ARA federal funding opportunities, most notably two of them that we've worked on recently, the Tiger II discretionary and planning grants and the Sustainable Communities and Community Challenge planning grants. One of the lessons that we learned out of from ARA was that the funding utilizing existing programs came through in these very siloed into very specific programs, and while you may be able to get transportation money in one area and you get broadband money in another area or energy efficiency, what we were really looking for was the opportunity to be able to combine money from various sources into what they call a place-based strategy to really be able to be effective in a particular area. And so the federal government has learned to do that, and what they've done is come up with some federal grant programs that are interdepartmental and interagency funded, where different federal agencies come in and put money into a pot for it, and that there's the outcomes that they look at are things such as improving transportation, housing, energy efficiency, job training, educational opportunities, etc. within a particular area. The first two sets of those grants were the Tiger II discretionary and planning grants and the Sustainable Communities and Community Challenge planning grants. Tiger II was a $400 million grant opportunity with $35 million in the planning area. Sustainable Communities was a regional planning grant for $100 million with specific community challenge grants of $40 million. In order to have the city be able to respond to this, we put together, through the mayor's office and CAO, an ad hoc urban policy working group consisting of various departments that would be impacted by these grant opportunities to come together and see if we could put forward very competitive grant proposals that drew upon the resources that each of these departments had. And we were very successful through the series of meetings, able to develop some pretty competitive bids, and I'm pleased to report that the Port of Los Angeles received a $16 million Tiger II discretionary grant for the West Basin Rail Yard and Congestion Reduction Project, and the Community Redevelopment Agency received a $2.25 million Sustainable Communities Challenge grant for the Northeast Los Angeles Community Studio. And I have representatives from both the Port and CRA who would like to take a few minutes to come up to the table here and describe their projects to you. And if I could ask them to come up to the table.
At this time. And also the record should reflect Mr. Alakan has joined us in the committee. Come on up.
Good. And while they're coming up, I also want to mention that there's a new set of federal grant initiatives and entitled Choice Neighborhoods, which incorporates housing, transportation, education, and social service elements to revitalize distressed communities. The Urban Policy Working Group yesterday heard presentations by HACLA and the Youth Policy Institute, who are pursuing separate, non-competing $250,000 grant opportunities through Choice Neighborhoods. HACLA's project focuses on Jordan Downs and the area surrounding it, while YPIA's project is centered on Pacoima. As part of the efforts to make these proposals interagency, the Los Angeles Neighborhood Revitalization Work Group was assembled, consisting of the city, the county, the sheriff, LAUSD, the County Office of Education, and First 5 LA. So those of us in the Urban Policy Working Group are looking forward to working collaboratively with this Neighborhood Revitalization Work Group to develop some competitive proposals that will demonstrate strong interdepartment and interagency cooperation. And those Choice Neighborhood grants are due on December 9th that they'll be applying for. And without further Mr. Chairman, I turn it over to the representatives from the Port and CRA.
I don't think it's a problem.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is my name is Isaac Cost-Reed from the Port of LA, and our project for Tiger 2 was the West Basin Rail Yard. It was one of two projects we'd submitted, as you may recall, in the Tiger 1 process. We submitted both the West Basin Rail Yard and the South Wilmington Grade Separation, and neither of them were funded. So we went back to the US DOT and said, what did we do wrong? LA actually, unfortunately, didn't receive any Tiger 1 funding. So in Tiger 2, we put together an application. Instead of requesting $47 million of a $125 million project, we requested 20 and ended up with 16. We're very pleased with the outcome, since there were $19 billion in projects nationwide competing for the $400 million available. What the project actually does is create an on-dock rail yard to service the entire port complex, which is key for two reasons. One, it increases our competitiveness, because really the key to bringing discretionary cargo, that's the cargo that can go to any other port in the country. The key to bringing that cargo here is how quickly we can move the boxes out and how efficiently we can move them out. On-dock rail allows us to take them directly from the ships onto the rail, leveraging our existing rail infrastructure and getting them on the Alameda Corridor up north and then out east to locations throughout the U.S. Otherwise, they have to get on trucks from the terminals, go to near-dock rail yards or distribution centers within the region. That creates congestion, danger of having all the trucks on the road. This project alone is projected to remove 2,300 daily truck trips from the road. Also, as part of the project to serve the rail yard, we're getting rid of 2 at-grade rail crossings, so again, reducing congestion and reducing the emissions from that congestion. In terms of jobs, the project itself will create about 2,000 construction jobs during its development. Long-term, the West Basin Rail Yard serves our 3 major West Basin terminals. That's China Shipping, Yangming, and and Trepac. Those 3 terminals handle between 5 and 10% of all of the containers coming into the United States. So this will make all 3 of those terminals more competitive. The third thing it does is it channels the cargo that comes into the port into the Alameda Corridor. That's obviously an existing federal investment, and one that, again, has accomplished moving cargo in and out of the region without congestion because of its below-grade rail crossing. The other thing I'd like to comment is that in addition to helping make America's port more competitive, it also, we like to say, helps make America's #1 working port America's #1 living port, because right now the community of Wilmington and San Pedro are heavily impacted by serving as the gateway for all this commerce. This helps improve our ability to remain competitive as a gateway, but also create opportunities for the community to grow and thrive.
I mean, is there a similar process going on in Long Beach, or do we work that closely with them? Because most of the material library, they kind of combine the 2 ports as in a sense of production and activity. So are they doing a similar type of operation?
It's a good, yes. This is one piece, this specific project is part of a $3 billion port rail system. We have multiple rail yards, grade crossings that are all part of the system. Long Beach is the lead agency on some of those. We're the lead agency on some of them. In this particular case, we actually included Long Beach in the application because the the ports rail system, which is the Pacific Harbor Line, it's the greenest rail system in the country, is actually served by the rail yard, and so it benefits both ports. They did not sign on to the application as an official sponsor. They actually submitted their own and ultimately weren't funded. So I can't say we were disappointed with that result.
Now, let me ask one other thing. On this project, is the port the primary initiator and also overseer of all of the projects, or some of it, is it farmed out, or just about how does it go about getting done?
We have a construction and engineering department that's going to do a lot of the work. We use an extensive list of contractors. I don't have all those names, although I know that our small business outreach efforts have been very successful. I think are being developed as sort of a model for some of the work in the city. So I'm quite confident that a lot of the business is going to go to contractors throughout the region.
Okay, but the port is
But we're the lead agency
Lead
for all of the
agency.
work.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Any questions, Mr. Alarcon? Richard, any question? Okay.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
For the record, my name is Allison Becker. I'm an associate planner with the Community Redevelopment Agency. I'm currently assigned to the Hollywood and Central region. I'm here to describe the work that will take place thanks to a $2.25 million grant award for planning activities that the Community Redevelopment Agency received through the HUD Office of Sustainability Community Planning Challenge Grant. This grant award will allow 3 key agencies, the Community Redevelopment Agency, the Department of City Planning, and the Department of Transportation, to create an implementation strategy for redevelopment that is guided by the policy and vision of the LA River Revitalization Master Plan that was adopted by the City Council in 2007. Together, these 3 departments are going to orchestrate a comprehensive planning effort that includes a targeted update of the Northeast Los Angeles Community Plan, a mobility plan that links residents with transit through the development of integrated mobility hubs and green complete streets, and a workforce needs assessment and development of a career ladder training program targeting a key sector of the local economy. The project will have a strong public education and engagement program, and it will also develop a technology tool to better track the economic and social impacts of redevelopment over time. Our team, in addition to our 3 city partners, included a variety of private sector and nonprofit partners, including the Workforce Investment Board, the Worker Education Resource Center, the Urban and Environmental Policy Institute at Occidental College, and the Metamorphosis Project at the University of Southern California. Together, this group, we're calling the Northeast Los Angeles Collaborative, will spend approximately 2 years working on this comprehensive strategy linking economic development with land use planning and mobility.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? We can move to item 2. One thing, we're going to have to be finished right at 10 because we have a significant number of activities in the council that we can't be late. So if we can get the item 2 up and get 3 and 4 in the queue. Good morning.
Good morning, council members. Laura Trejo, General Manager of the City Department of Aging. We are here requesting approval of a subaward letter in agreement between the department and the the University of California at Los Angeles. This is to establish a community-based research center. It would provide the department over the next 3 years $127,204 to cover primarily 15% of my time towards the operation of the center. It also includes related costs as instructed by council and mayor. We are very excited. This is really the culmination of about 8 years of partnering with UCLA. We have managed successfully about $7 million worth of grant dollars, and this time, this is our second application to the National Institutes of Health, and we were successfully able to bring into Los Angeles about $1 million over the next 3 years to establish infrastructure to develop a community-based research center. It's important for the department to be part of this collaborative because grant seeking has become more competitive in the field of aging in terms of ensuring that the project ideas, services that we're proposing to funders have good empirical evaluations done, that they are well understood in terms of their measurable outcomes to improve the quality of life of seniors. So I believe that this is very much in keeping with the department's mission, and my role as general manager to ensure that our department is as competitive as possible in being able to access other public and private resources. So we're very pleased to have the opportunity to collaborate with UCLA in this new center.
Yeah. When does this come to council?
Excuse me?
When does it come to council?
I believe we would be hoping that it would be as soon as possible.
Okay. Okay. All right, thank you very much. We'll approve that item. Record reflect Mr. Rosendahl joined us. We are on item 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me ask, we have one public comment on item 3. Noel Whites, come up to the podium.
Morning, Bill. Good morning, Mr. Parks. My comment on this relates to the situation on Lincoln Place. Lincoln Place is one of the applicants for these monies, and I think that's just fine as far as it goes. We need to get tenants back in. The issue, unfortunately, is the DWP has not been particularly, shall we say, cooperative relative to trying to work and move forward various proposals that the owner, AIMCO, has put forward. I've asked Mr. Rosendahl to introduce a resolution under AB 811, and I think that we need, and this committee needs to look at the use of AB 811 as a mechanism which, when combined with these kinds of grants, can facilitate and promote and catalyze the creation of, I think, what's intended here, which is more solar, more energy efficient procedures. Unfortunately, the City Council has not done it. A lot of cities in this state have. And so going forward, I would just ask the powers that be if we could begin to give serious consideration to the use of AB 811. In the context of Lincoln Place, it's a perfect situation. If Bill Rosendahl wants to expand it to the entire district or West LA, that's fine too. But we're talking 38 acres, we're talking 700 units, we're talking the means by which we can truly generate viable economic activity at a time when we have an affordable housing crisis and there's all this affordable housing that is not being used, as you know, to say nothing of the job situation. So I just want to highlight the need to give Lincoln Place the kind of consideration that I think it needs in this situation, and to hopefully get the council and this committee to try to figure out a way to tie in AB 811 and frankly AB 474 on water conservation to these kinds of programs. It'll help landlords too, and that also frankly ties in with Mr. Alarcon's motion, which he got back pablum. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Angelica Samayoa with the CAO's office, and Krista Klein is here from the Housing Department. Do you want me to provide a brief overview?
Just very brief.
Ooh, I'm not good at that, but I'll try. So back in October the 6th, 2010, the Council authorized the Housing Department to issue the Round 3 NOFA. This is an Affordable Housing Trust for Notice of Funding Availability, and to report back to the Council and Mayor with the final results of that process. The Department set aside they set aside $4.7 million of the energy efficiency and conservation block grant funds. towards this NOFA process. So today's request is focused only on the EECBG funds that were set aside for the NOFA. The department received 20 proposals from nonprofits and for-profit developers by the due date of October 18th. So at this point, the department's in the process of reviewing and evaluating proposals. The department selected 15 from the list of 20 proposers to proceed to the next phase of review, which consists of an energy audit. 13 proposals were submitted by nonprofit developers who will receive financial assistance of $10,000 each from Enterprise Community Partners, a national nonprofit organization, to complete their required audits. However, 2 of the proposals were submitted by for-profit developers. This is McCormick Barone Salazar and AIMCO, which were not eligible to receive this financial assistance, and therefore the department has come forward requesting that these 2 proposers receive $10,000 each, or a total of $20,000 from the EECBG allocation to complete that energy audit. Our office recommends approval of this request. There was a second request included, which was authority to execute permanent loan agreements with the top-ranked proposers at the end of the evaluation process based on the list that was provided in the Housing Department's transmittal. So the department would be authorized to execute the contracts and then in return for council, just as an informational to the council. However, that request was based on an understanding that the EECBG block grant had an expenditure, or actually an obligation deadline of January 27, 2011, and that was to be evidenced by executed contracts. However, after the department's transmittal was issued, the Community Development Department, who administers the EECBG grant, notified us that that requirement has now been lifted and is no longer applicable. Therefore, after discussing this with the department, we kind of agree that this is no longer as urgent. Therefore, this office recommends that no action be taken on that request, and if no action is taken, the department will report back to council with recommendations for final award based on the results of the round 3 NOFA once it's concluded, and that was what was originally approved last month when the council reviewed this request.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions for housing. One of the things I didn't understand is that we went out for, request for proposal, and when the 20 responses came in, it's clear that there's a disparity as to area of the city that they responded. My first question would be, did we look at whether we had done a sufficient outreach in the rest of the city? Because if we go with the list of 15, about a half of them are in one district.
Right.
And so I'm just trying to figure out, did we look at that and see there's a disparity and we needed to go out and do more outreach? Because I'm assuming every district has multifamily units that would benefit from this.
I think a lot of the units the buildings that did apply are from CD1 and CD9. That is because a lot of those units have worked with the housing department before and have gotten loans before from us. So, and they're on a timeline that they need to be retrofitted. So I think they were ripe to be applicants for this grant. So that's why I think we received so many.
I think it's somewhat unfair if this is the type of funding that would benefit citywide, that only those who may have a better or more recent relationship with housing are on the list, doesn't mean that there's less of a problem citywide. And the issue is, I understand there's certain qualifications, it's a loan, but if we don't make other nonprofits or people that have multifamily units citywide aware of it, they can't even get in the mix. And here we're spending almost $5 million, or we're going to loan $5 million to upgrade buildings, but yet it's a very small defined area that's going to benefit. And there's only a small handful of nonprofits that can benefit. And what we get complaints with in my district is that when this becomes public, everybody will rush in and say, well, we found out about it when it was over, because the outreach it would appear the outreach would have been expanded when we only saw small numbers of districts represented.
Yeah, I can sympathize with that. I do understand. I know that the standard NOFA outreach was done for the NOFA as a whole, this being part of that overall NOFA. I think the issue with going back with more outreach, once we did receive these applicants, these 20 applicants, and knowing where they were located, is the time frame that we need to get this money out the door. I would have loved to have gone back and done more outreach, but we still do need to spend the money by June 30th. So even though the obligation deadline has been lifted for the end of January, we are still on a pretty tight schedule to get this money out the door.
Will we have another series of these types of funds?
From the looks of the new Congress, I don't think so.
Yeah. I understand timing, but I don't know if timing drives that 2/3 of the city gets left out. That's what my concern is.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Parks. And as you can see, 6 of them are in CD1. There's one in CD11, of course, that's, and I'm queuing off of Noah Weiss's comments as well. Is anybody here from DWP? Could you come up to the table, please? What I'm excited about is that assuming we can do the energy audit of AMCO, they would then obviously on the list be more attractively viewed. There are 700 units there. As Mr. Weiss said, there's 38 acres of land. One of the strategies to finally put Lincoln Place to bed is to make it energy efficient and retrofit it, and DWP actually engage in that aspect to such a degree that our energy costs go down and we move forward with Lincoln Place, which is a major issue for us in the 11th District. So if DWP could just comment, we've had a series of meetings with Austin Buettner was involved and others in his department, and there's been a general compatible feeling between AMCO and DWP on moving forward. So I'd like a little update of this in conjunction with this energy strategy. Morning.
Good morning. Gretchen Hardison, Department of Water and Power. I must apologize. I am not up to date on the most current discussions with Lincoln Place. I do know a number of the measures discussed have to do with water conservation, the landscaping at the development there. I am happy to provide you some more information as soon as I can get back to the office.
Okay, well, we appreciate the CAO strategy on this to move forward and separate that out and put the 10,000 get going on the audit. And if we can move forward with that in the council today, that would be the direction that DWP then would work with. Would that be correct, CAO?
I think I'm not really familiar with the DWP part. I'm sorry, I'm just not that familiar with how the DWP component ties into the review process.
All right, when we finish this item, then please, I'd like you to take a sidebar meeting with Noah Weiss, who has got some great strategies that we're into. Frankly, it's getting me impatient, the amount of time we've spent in not moving forward with this. It's a pretty simple request. There's 700 units there, and when we retrofit them in the new greening strategy, it will be eligible for more significant funding that can help us get this project going. So would you take a meeting with him in the back there, and then in our next meeting on this, Mr. Clark, I'd like an update that actually gives the DWP a chance to respond more thoroughly to these questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Alacon? Richard, you have any questions? Okay. Let me just ask one other thing. Being that this was an allocation to the city and they're giving housing a portion of it,
Correct.
what created the urgency in the sense, because it seems like we had access to the money much longer than housing had to spend it.
The decision from the House, this is Krista Klein from the Housing Department, the decision in the Housing Department was to release this money through our standard NOFA process. So I think that restricted our timeline somewhat because we knew the NOFA was coming out this fall. So we developed a lot of the program parameters over the summer, late spring, early summer. We've been ready to go, but we were waiting for this NOFA to be issued.
Okay. The other issue is, just for background, is that if we don't move forward on this, is it viewed that the city loses the money if it's not spent by, what, June 30th?
Yes, half the money for the overall $37 million EECBG grant
has to be spent by June 30th. I think DOE is relying upon the Housing Department to really push over the line with that. Our program is actually further ahead than a lot of the other programs under that grant, so they're
I would just like housing in the future, that if we're going to be, even with timelines, that we just not ignore 3/4 of the city in a process that would be valuable in every district. And so that's what I asked housing to look at. Thank you.
All right.
So we'll move that item.
Thank you.
Next item. Item 4.
Thanks, B.
Well, my name is Mark Hoffman. I'm with the Community Development Department, and here today because of our monthly report to your committee regarding the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. We have transmitted our monthly report to your committee, which indicates the status of the 15 projects that are funded by the $37 million in this block grant. The second largest project allocation is the Housing Department, and you heard about the status of their project. The report indicates status of all of them. I can highlight a few of the more significant developments. The street lighting, Bureau of Street Lighting, as I indicated last time I was here, is moving ahead with retrofitting 600 street lights, and that is helping us move money and get results on the ground. The Department of Water and Power is moving ahead with their 5 projects, and of note are 3 in particular. One I spoke about last time, which is Cool House retrofit, Cool House incentives, and they announced that through various media, and they're waiting to see who comes forth for rebates. The second program that they're about to unveil within the next week or two is opportunities for nonprofits to apply for outreach efforts in the area of energy efficiency and conservation. And there will be awards given to nonprofits in each of the council districts to reach out in terms of energy information. And the third area is grants to nonprofits for retrofit work. First, there'll be audits, energy efficiency audits, to see where efficiencies can occur in the nonprofit communities and buildings. And then additionally, there will be some retrofits of selected projects, and that will come forth as an RFP process later in November. Additionally, the largest project of the $37 million is the one associated with general services and called municipal retrofits, and that you've heard about before in terms of a plan to retrofit city buildings in terms of energy efficiency. Initially, the plan was to pursue a bond which would pay for much of this work, but because of the timeline associated with spending the $37 million, we are considering an expedited way to spend that money, and that would be more along the lines of having general services begin to do some of the retrofit work itself. So of that line item that they have, which is $14 million, we're going to begin to peel off some so that they can begin some retrofit work, which will accomplish many things, spending money, showing results, getting people employed, and satisfying our funding source, the Department of Energy, that we're using their money well and wisely and quickly.
Let me just ask, I have 2 questions. One, so if we've changed directions, that we're no longer looking to leverage the $14 million into $30 million?
Well, the city has received authority to do that bonding from the state. The problem that we see is the timing. Your committee had approved a consultant to assess the energy savings so we could assure the city that there would not be an effect on the city's general fund. but we've found that that process is taking a long time and may take as much as 6 months or more to complete. And that's 6 months where we wouldn't be spending money. And that is why we're beginning to reassess, not discontinuing the idea of the QECB, but discontinuing it at this time with these funds perhaps. And we'll be further assessing that in the near future. But in the meantime, we want to get as much money into retrofits as possible. And the quickest way to do that is have general services do the work or contract out for the work.
Let me just express my concern. We brought it up before. The issue was not only the timing it took for the assessment, but at no time did anyone have a clear idea how the debt was going to be paid back. And so that's a major issue about if we're using part of the $14 million to start retrofit, that was going to be part of the debt service if you leveraged it. So now that seems to be moving that off the table. And so what we'll end up with is an assessment of 130 buildings, and then have to look at how, in another way of funding the retrofit. And some of the discussion came out of this committee was that we look at DWP because of that savings of whether you can begin to deal with city buildings on a advance on the savings as they did on other projects that we've had, that would be a means of as a resource to begin working in the buildings. But we didn't want to push this until November, December, and then show up and say, we want to get this 30-some million, and we still don't know how we're going to pay for it. So if we're now saying we're going to use the 14 million and we're going to start fixing buildings, then that's more reasonable than coming to us in December or in January saying we have a $30 million program we can't fund. Okay.
Exactly.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is on the 40 workers that they say displaced, are they no longer on the payroll, or are they on the payroll and working in jobs that they are different jobs?
The 40 people you're referring to are part of the vocational worker program, and they were destined to be laid off, and some may have been laid off, but they are now in a training program with LA Trade Tech, and they are going to transition very shortly into working with general services and being city employees in a vocational worker job.
If they're at Trade Tech now, are they still on general services payroll?
Yes, they are.
Okay, is that one of the reasons general services is over budget?
I can't speak to general services budget, but this grant is paying for the training and
training, but not their salary.
It is paying for those 40 people's salary, both in training and when they'll be performing on the job training/work experience.
So let me get clear. The 40 people, their salaries are being paid by the grant that we have here?
Yes.
So that's special fund money, not their salary account?
Right. The funds from the special fund are directed to the account to pay for those 40 people's salaries.
Now, you're saying that the expectation is those 40 people will now be, after they're trained, come back and they will be the workers that will implement the $14 million retrofit program?
I think there's more to it than that. Bear in mind, these were general services employees in an entirely different classification to begin with. So they're going through some training, and they'll do some energy-related work in order to be eligible for this grant funding. But I don't think the intent is to have the 40 people do the bulk of the retrofit work. That work will probably be done by contractors, hiring hall, and general services staff.
Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. Richard, any questions? Richard, any questions? Okay. Let me just say, and I think all the other issues are clear, but we definitely need the CAO and general services on the next report back. And what do we ask every month? To clarify this whole issue of the $14 million, what it's going to be used for, how many buildings it's going to cover. Also, if the issue of the $30 million leverage grant, if that's off the table and there's no need to begin to look for debt service on that, and we need a clarity on the 40 employees, how they're being paid now, what impact it makes on the general services general fund budget, and what they will be doing once they finish training and how will they be paid. So we need that clarity on those two issues so that we do not have general services budget being blown up and we're not later looking for the leverage of that $40 million that may or may not be coming because we don't have the debt service. And we need to clearly know how much the $14 million is going to buy. Is it going to fix 1/5 of the buildings? Is it going to fix, and what are they working on as it relates to buildings if we haven't gotten the assessment back? So those are things that we need real clarity on so that we are fully aware of what our expectations are.
Okay.
Yes?
Beth Giles from the Mayor's Office.
I can't hear you.
Beth Giles, Director of Sustainability in the Mayor's Office. I do want to clarify that the QECB bonds are not entirely off the table. What we have decided to do is to move them out. There isn't a time frame by which we need to apply for the bonds. We've done the application, but for the bonds to actually be given to us. So the idea is that we will do a number of retrofits and gather real data on the energy savings so that we can then, when we get the data, make an assessment of whether or not it's fruitful to go ahead and leverage the bonds.
Okay, but let me just say this about leveraging the bonds, and just want to be very clear. If you have no debt service built into it, it's kind of ludicrous to bring us a plan down the road and say, this is what we can do. So we really need the clarity of the debt service. We also need the clarity that if they're spending part of the $14 million now, which was to leverage, then what leverage will you have if you seek the grant? So we're spending that money currently, which cuts out the leverage, and then we don't have debt service. Those are two major holes we can't fill. And then if it's blowing out general services budget to deal with these 40 employees, that's another issue we can't address. So those are three things that are cost prohibitive that we're dealing with, and we need to come to some clarity with them. Okay? So thank you very much. So we will, do we have an action on number 4?
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
This is just a report back. We'll receive the report back and ask for those specific items of information on the next report back. So that would close, is that all of our items? Yep.
For item number 4, you're approving the recommendations from the department?
Let me I thought that was just for information.
The recommendations of the Community Development Department, it says.
Yes, we'll approve those recommendations, but ask those specific reports back on the next reporting period. Thank you. So we're adjourned on this ad hoc committee at this time. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I'm starting. That was good.